She stood at my door drenched from the rain, her eyes swollen from crying. "Please, just hear me out," she whispered, her voice trembling with regret. I hadn't seen her in 2 years. Not since I discovered the affair and walked away without a word. I thought I had buried the pain, locked it away where it could never touch me again. But standing there, face to face with the woman who shattered me, I realized that some wounds never truly heal. We met like characters out of a love story, unexpectedly, effortlessly. She was vibrant, full of life, the kind of woman who could light up a room with just a smile. I was drawn to her like gravity, convinced she was my forever. Our wedding was simple but perfect, vows exchanged under a sunset sky, whispered promises filled with trembling emotion. I believed every word she said that day. I thought she did too. The first year of our marriage felt like a dream. Late-night talks, spontaneous road trips, lazy Sundays wrapped in each other's arms. But dreams don't last forever. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, things changed. She became distant, distracted. Her laughter no longer reached her eyes, and the warmth of her touch faded, replaced by cold excuses and unanswered questions. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I had missed something. But deep down, I knew. Love doesn't simply disappear without a reason. It was a Thursday. Funny how the most ordinary days become the ones you remember the most, when everything falls apart. She said she had to work late again. I nodded, pretending not to notice how she wouldn't meet my gaze, how her smile felt more like a mask than the warmth I once knew. I told myself I was overthinking, but the unease sat heavy in my chest, a quiet, suffocating presence I could no longer ignore. The signs had been there all along. The sudden late nights at the office, the way she guarded her phone like it held the meaning of life, the distant look in her eyes when I talked about our future. She used to light up when we planned vacations, or even just discuss what to cook for dinner. But lately, her mind was somewhere else, with someone else. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence screaming louder than any argument we never had. Around midnight, curiosity, or maybe fear, got the best of me. Her phone was on the nightstand, screen dim, her breathing soft beside me. I told myself I was just being paranoid, that I'd open it, find nothing and feel foolish. But that's not what happened. I picked it up, hands trembling, heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would wake her. No password change. Maybe part of her wanted to be caught. I scrolled through her messages, and there it was. A conversation with someone saved under an innocent name. CLA from work. Only Claire wasn't from work. The messages weren't about meetings or deadlines. They were about stolen moments, hidden touches, nights she had claimed to be working late. My chest tightened with every word. I felt hot and cold all at once, my heart struggling to process the betrayal. There were pictures too. Selfies she had never sent me. Smiles that were never for me. I looked at the woman beside me, the woman I had vowed to love and protect, and realized she was someone I didn't recognize anymore. I put the phone down gently, afraid to wake her. She looked peaceful, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. And in that moment, I understood something. There was no point in confrontation. No dramatic fight would undo the damage. No angry words would stitch my heart back together. So I did the only thing I could. I quietly got out of bed, packed a small bag, just the essentials. No keepsakes, no memories. I didn't want them. Before I left, I stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at her one last time. The woman I had loved. The woman who had broken me. Then I turned around and walked away. I didn't leave because I was weak. I left because staying would have been worse. And sometimes, silence speaks louder than any goodbye. Leaving was the easy part. It's what comes after that guts you. I had no plan when I walked out that night. No destination, no farewell. Just a duffel bag with enough clothes for a week and a heart that felt hollowed out. I drove until exhaustion forced me to stop, pulling into some cheap roadside motel, where the walls were thin, and the flickering lights couldn't decide if they wanted to stay on. Fitting really, like my own heart, unsure if it should keep beating. The first morning without her was surreal. I woke up expecting the warmth of her beside me, the faint scent of her shampoo lingering on my pillow. But there was nothing. Just stiff motel sheets, and the crushing realization that my life had changed forever. I moved to a new city, a place where no one knew my name, where I could disappear into the crowd. My apartment was small, bare walls, a cheap couch, a mattress on the floor. No framed photos, no cozy blankets she had picked out. No reminders of the life I used to have. I thought starting over would feel like freedom. Instead, it felt like being lost. The kind of lost where even your own reflection in the mirror feels unfamiliar. I drowned myself in work, because it was the only thing that didn't feel personal. Deadlines didn't care about broken hearts. Emails didn't ask how I was holding up. But even in the chaos, loneliness found me. In the quiet moments between meetings. In the empty space between texts from people who didn't really know me. Nights were the worst. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. I'd lie awake, haunted by echoes of her laughter, by the ghost of a life I had left behind. I tried dating once or twice. It wasn't fair to them. I was a shadow of myself, comparing every smile, every touch to hers. Not because I missed her, but because I was still trying to understand how someone you love can betray you so easily. And that's when I realized, healing isn't about moving on to someone new. It's about facing the emptiness she left behind, learning to live with it, until it doesn't hurt anymore. There were days I hated her for the lies, for the betrayal, for making me question my worth. But there were also days I hated myself more, for not seeing the signs, for not being enough, for trusting too easily. That's the thing about heartbreak. It doesn't just shatter your heart. It cracks your self-esteem, your confidence, your sense of who you are. But slowly life crept back in. Not in grand cinematic moments, but in small quiet ways. The first quiet victories came in the smallest moments. The first time I laughed without feeling guilty. The first night I slept without waking up in the middle of a nightmare. The first time I looked in the mirror and saw more than just a man who had been left behind. I found new routines, new places, new people who didn't know my past and didn't look at me with pity. I rebuilt myself from the ground up, not into the man I was before her, but into someone stronger, someone who knew the cost of blind trust and the value of self-respect. I thought I had closed that chapter for good, that I had buried the pain deep enough to forget. But grief has a funny way of creeping back in. Sometimes it hides in a song, sometimes in a scent, and sometimes it shows up at your front door. It was a regular day, nothing remarkable about it. Just another morning where I made my coffee, sat by the window, and watched the city wake up. The kind of peace I had fought hard to find. But peace is fragile. It only takes one knock to shatter it. A soft, hesitant knock. I wasn't expecting anyone. Probably a neighbor, I thought, or a delivery left at the wrong apartment. But when I opened the door, it wasn't a neighbor. It wasn't a stranger. It was her. She stood there drenched from the rain, her hair plastered to her face, her eyes swollen and red. Not the woman I remembered, polished, put together, confident. No, this was someone else. Someone broken. She opened her mouth as if she had rehearsed a speech, but all that came out was a shaky whisper. Please just hear me out. I didn't say a word. I just stared. 2 years. 2 years of silence, of rebuilding my life brick by fragile brick. And now here she was, standing on the threshold as if no time had passed at all. I could have slammed the door. I should have. But curiosity, or maybe some lingering ghost of love, held me in place. I stepped aside. She walked in, dripping water onto the floor, her presence heavier than the silence between us. Her eyes moved around the room, taking in the life I had built without her. No pictures, no reminders of the man she once knew. Just me, and the version of myself she had unknowingly helped create through heartbreak. She didn't sit. She just stood there, wringing her hands, searching for words that wouldn't come. Finally, she broke the silence. I've been looking for you, she said, her voice small. I needed to tell you I'm sorry. That word felt like both too much and not enough. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding, leaning against the wall with my arms crossed. 2 years, I said quietly. And all you have is sorry. She started to cry. Not the silent, graceful kind you see in movies, but the raw, messy kind. The kind that comes from a place so deep it's almost unbearable to witness. I was wrong, she choked out. I don't know what I thought. I made the biggest mistake of my life, and I've been paying for it every day since you left. She talked about regret, about sleepless nights, about how the affair meant nothing compared to what she lost. She told me how she had searched for me, how every relationship after me crumbled, because she couldn't stop comparing them to what we had. And I listened, not because I wanted to forgive her, not because I missed her, but because I needed to hear it. I needed to confirm what I had already known for a long time, that walking away had been the best decision I had ever made. When she finished, the silence between us stretched long and heavy, as if it could swallow us both whole. Finally I spoke. "I'm glad you found me." Her eyes flickered with hope. "But not for the reason you think." She stepped closer, reaching out as if she wanted to touch me, but I stepped back. "I forgave you a long time ago," I continued. "Not because you deserved it, but because I did. I needed to let go, to move on. And I did. You're just a memory now." Her face crumbled. For a brief moment I felt a pang of something, pity maybe, but not love, not anger, just closure. She left without another word, and I closed the door behind her. This time it wasn't an escape. It was the end of a story I had once believed would haunt me forever. But it didn't. Not anymore. As the door clicked shut behind her, the silence felt different, lighter, as if a weight had finally been lifted from my chest. I stood there for a moment, my hands still resting on the doorknob, realizing that this was the closure I had never known I needed. Not the dramatic confrontation I had imagined in my darkest nights. Not a shouting match. Not an emotional breakdown. Just the truth. Raw. Simple. Final. I walked back to the window, staring out at the city lights, the rain blurring everything like a watercolor painting. I thought about who I had been when I left her. Broken. Angry. Lost. But now I was someone else. Someone stronger. Someone who didn't need her apology to feel whole again. Regret has a way of living rent-free in the hearts of those who deserve it most. I saw it in her eyes. That hollow space where her pride used to be, now filled with nothing but guilt. But that guilt wasn't mine to carry. Not anymore. I picked up my coffee, now cold, and smiled to myself. A small, quiet smile. The kind that comes when you realize you've won a battle no one else even knew you were fighting. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to hurt her the way she hurt me. The real victory was in walking away and staying gone. Love doesn't die in one moment. It fades slowly, like a song you can't quite remember the lyrics to. And standing there, with the echo of her footsteps fading down the hall, I realized something. I couldn't even remember the melody anymore. I didn't hate her. I didn't love her. I just didn't feel anything at all. And that was the most powerful thing of all. Because forgiveness isn't about them. It's about you. It's about looking at the person who broke you and realizing they don't have that power anymore. So I closed the door, not just to my apartment, but to the chapters she no longer belonged to. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. In the end, it wasn't her apology that set me free. It was the journey I took without her. The nights I survived alone. The mornings I woke up stronger. And the quiet battles no one saw but me. She came back expecting to find the same man she left behind. But that man was gone. I had buried him beneath every lesson learned, every scar earned, every moment of self-discovery. I didn't need closure from her, because I had already found it within myself. Forgiveness wasn't a gift I gave her. It was the freedom I gave myself. So if you're holding on to someone who broke you, waiting for an apology that may never come, let me tell you this. You are the closure you've been looking for. You don't need their regret to heal. You just need to choose yourself. And when you finally do, you'll realize that's the real happy ending.